Welcome, everyone. I am back with part two, the characteristics of manipulation and cutting the strings of control. His name says it all. After 9 months of jostling in Rebekah's womb, Jacob comes into the world just behind Esau, his hand grasping Esau's heel. The name Jacob means heel catcher, but its significance also stretches further into time, when Jacob's character will one day mirror the name's additional meanings, trickster and supplanter. The two brothers couldn't be more different. Esau is extroverted and brash and a skillful hunter, and Jacob is introverted and quiet, a cook who prefers spending his days at home. Esau is described as hairy. Jacob is described as smooth. Esau has the favor of his father, Isaac. Jacob has the favor of his mother, Rebekah. Jacob's manipulative ways will manifest themselves in adulthood when another jostling of sorts occurs over Esau's birthright. Esau would later say of Jacob in Genesis chapter 27, verse 36, "Isn't he rightly named Jacob? This is the second time he has taken advantage of me." Part A. What players participate in the game of manipulation? Esau has just returned from the countryside with one thing on his mind: his stomach. Once he gets a whiff of the thick, red lentil stew Jacob is cooking, he's willing to satisfy his hunger pains at all cost. "Quick, let me have some of that red stew, I'm famished." Genesis 25 verse 30. Esau does indeed get a delicious bowl of stew along with some bread and something to drink, but it costs him dearly. Jacob offers the stew on one condition: Esau must give him his birthright. In Genesis 25 verse 33, Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. As their father Isaac is now aged and approaching death, the loss of the birthright blessing will soon leave Esau with a very bad taste in his mouth. And so it generally goes with those who partake of the foul game of manipulation. Yet those who play the game have an entirely different perspective, as do Jacob and his mother, Rebekah. Manipulative power players use verbal and physical abuse to gain power, use put downs to gain position, dominate conversations to gain control, use threats to intimidate, say anything to humiliate. Goal: to manipulate by implying, "I am right and you are wrong." In Psalm 140 verse 3, "They make their tongues as sharp as a serpent's. The poison of vipers is on their lips." Manipulative martyrers scold others to make them feel sad, blame others to make them feel bad, play the guilt game to make others feel at fault, shame others to make them feel sorry, play the victim to make others feel pity. The goal: to manipulate by implying, "It's all your fault. How could you treat me this way?" Proverbs chapter 15 verse 4. The soothing tongue is a tree of life, but a perverse tongue crushes the spirit. Manipulative rescuers provide unsolicited help to make others feel obligated, assist others even when not wanted to gain a sense of indebtedness, help others to make them feel integrated, give exaggerated care to cause others to feel a commitment, Extend aid in order to coerce others. Goal: to manipulate by implying, after all I have done for you, now you owe me. In Proverbs 21 verse 2, a person may think their own ways are right, but the Lord weighs the heart. Manipulative people pleasers use charm to gain favor of others, praise others to gain approval, accommodate others to gain appreciation, extend favors to gain gratitude, do kind acts to gain loyalty. To manipulate by implying, the goal: after all I've done to please you, you should please me. In Proverbs 31 verse 30, charm is deceptive. Part B, what are the 8 S's of verbal manipulation? Like mother, like son, the time has come, and Isaac is ready to bestow the birthright blessing upon his oldest son. Esau, apparently oblivious to the bartering between Jacob and Esau for a mere bowl of stew. Rebekah overhears Isaac telling Esau to go hunt some wild game and prepare him some tasty food. Then he will give his firstborn his blessing in Genesis 27 verse 4. Immediately, Rebekah's manipulative mind begins strategizing, and she takes full advantage of one critical factor concerning her husband he can no longer see. No sooner Esau has walked out of the door when Rebekah gives the following instructions to Jacob. Now, my son, listen carefully and do what I tell you. Go out to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats, so I can prepare some tasty food for your father, just the way he likes it. Then take it to your father to eat, so he may give you his blessing before he dies. In Genesis 27, verses 8 through 10, Jacob's mind reels with questions. But my brother Esau is a hairy man, while I have smooth skin. What if my father touches me? In Genesis 27, verse 11 through 12, Jacob fears becoming the recipient of a curse rather than a blessing. But Rebekah accepts full responsibility and proceeds with her plot. And as it turns out, the goats will be useful for more than just tasty food. And the scheming and conniving go on, with one verbal game after another. Verbal methods of playing the game. 1. Subversive schemers. Scheming to plot a deceptive plan. Scheming to distort reality. Scheming by telling half-truths. Scheming by misrepresentation. The Bible addresses how God deals with schemers. God catches the wise in their craftiness, and the schemes of the wily are swept away. In Job chapter 5 verse 13, the manipulator implies, if you don't willingly do what I want, I will trick you into doing it. 2. Scheming shoulds. You should show me respect. You should meet my needs. You should make me happy. You should give me security. You owe me. You ought to. You are expected to. You are supposed to. The Bible says love is not self-seeking. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 verse 5. The manipulator implies, if you don't meet my expectations, you are guilty of neglect. 3. Strident screaming. Yelling to apply pressure. Yelling to unnerve. Yelling to publicly humiliate. And yelling to intimidate. The Bible says they sharpen their tongues like swords and aim cruel words like deadly arrows. In Psalm 64 verses 3 through 4, the manipulator implies, if you don't do what I want, I'll make you wish you had. 4. Sarcastic swords. Stabbing with cutting humor. Stabbing with jabbing words. Stabbing with put-downs. Stabbing with malicious mocking. The Bible says those who crucified Jesus twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand. Then they knelt in front of him and mocked him. Hail, King of the Jews. Matthew 27, verse 29. The manipulator implies, if you aren't what I want you to be, I will use words to wound you. 5. Sexual seduction. Seductive talk, suggestive clothing, sensual advertising, sexual body movements. The Bible warns about the manipulative, seductive woman. With persuasive words, she led him astray. She seduced him with her smooth talk. All at once he followed her like an ox going to the slaughter, like a deer stepping into a noose. Proverbs chapter 7, verses 21 through 22. The manipulator implies, if you don't buy what I'm selling, you are not going to be popular or powerful, accepted or admired. 6. Showering sentiments. Excessive praise to appeal to the ego. Excessive gifts to create a sense of obligation. Excessive affection to gain a sexual or emotional advantage. Excessive money to buy control. The Bible says a flattering mouth works ruin. In Proverbs 26, verse 28. The manipulator implies, if you don't respond to my generosity by doing what I want you to do, you are ungrateful. 7. Sly suggestions. Guilt game number 1. A wife says, John just bought Sarah a new car. It must be nice to be so loved. Guilt game 2. A husband says, Mary encouraged her husband to go out with the guys anytime he wants. Mary encourages her husband to go out with the guys anytime he wants. For as long as he wants, he's lucky to have such a wife. Guilt game 3. A friend says to another friend, Chris has a friend who will give him any amount of money, no questions asked. Now that is a true friend. Guilt game 4. A teenager says to parents, none of my friends have a curfew. It must be nice to have such trusting parents. The Bible describes the manipulator. Enemies disguise themselves with their lips, but in their hearts they harbor deceit. In Proverbs 26, verse 24, the manipulator implies, you ought to meet my every need, and if you don't, I'll make you feel guilty. 8. Sympathy seekers, speaking and acting needy intentionally, speaking and acting pitiful with pity parties, speaking and acting helpless and childlike, speaking and acting hopeless unless a rescuer arrives. The Bible says each one should carry their own load. Galatians chapter 6, verse 5. The manipulator implies you should take care of my heart, and if you don't, you are callous and cruel. C. What are the 8 S's of nonverbal manipulation? Rebecca covers Jacob's hands and neck in goat hair and Rebecca covers Jacob's hands and neck in goat hair and puts Esau's best clothes on him. The ruse is now complete. Jacob is the personification of Esau down to the smell of the outdoors that wafts through Esau's clothing. Esau presents himself before Isaac, who may be blind today but wasn't born yesterday. Isaac inquires about the short time span it took Esau to find and cook the game, and instantly recognizes Jacob's voice, but is perplexed by his hairy hands. As Jacob responds to his father's inquiries, the portrait of deceit becomes colored with more than just manipulation. The quickly served up meal, the Lord your God gave me success. In Genesis 27, verse 20, Jacob lies. Are you really my son Esau? I am. Genesis 27, verse 24, Jacob lies again, and the birthright blessing ensues. May God give you heaven's dew and earth's richness, and an abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and may those who bless you be blessed. Genesis 27 verses 28 through 29. Thus, this manipulative maze incorporates deceptive words and actions with blatant lies and hairy hands. Nonverbal methods of playing the manipulation game. 1. The situation Caesar uses the poor judgment of others to receive personal promotion, uses the poor health of others to receive personal profit, uses the problems of others to receive personal praise, uses the pain of others to receive personal progress. The Bible says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves. In Philippians chapter 2, verse 3, the manipulator implies, my wants and wishes supersede those of everyone else. 2. Silent treatment. Pouting, brooding, and ignoring. Coldly turning away from your spouse, not answering the phone or door as punishment, refusing to speak to an offender. The Bible says, so I remained utterly silent, not even saying anything good, but my anguish increased. Psalm 39 verse 2. The manipulator implies, if you don't do what I want, you don't get my approval, my communication, or me. 3. Slam, bam, slamming. Slamming drawers, slamming doors, phones, books. The Bible says, in your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. Ephesians 4, verse 26. The manipulator implies, if you don't meet my expectations, you don't deserve any dialogue with me. But I'll make my point in other intimidating ways. 4. Scornful sneer. The curl of the lip, the roll of the eyes, the raising of the eyebrows, the squinting of the eyes. The Bible says, who are you mocking? At whom do you sneer and stick out your tongue? Are you not a brood of rebels, the offspring of liars? Isaiah 57 verse 4. The manipulator implies, if you don't do what I want you to do, you don't deserve my respect. 5. Sarcastic sounds. Audible sighs, deep grunts, long groans, and smacked lips. The Bible the Bible says, all my longings lie open before you. Lord, my sighing is not hidden from you. Psalm 38 verse 39. The manipulator implies, if you don't meet my expectations, I will let you know how how perturbed I am with you without saying a word to you. 6. Suppress support. Withholding compliments, withholding gifts, withholding affection, and withdrawing presents. The Bible says via the Apostle Paul, we are not withholding our affection from you, but you are withholding yours from us. In 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 12, the manipulator implies, if you don't meet my standards, you will suffer it by not getting any attention whatsoever from me. 7. Strategic stalling. Intentionally slow, late, deaf by ignoring, forgetful. The Bible says love does not dishonor others. In 1 Corinthians chapter 13 verse 5, the manipulator implies, if you don't give me control, I'll take control in other ways and frustrate you in the process. 8. Conniveling sober. timed tears, subtle sniffles, tearful stories, and extended crying. The Bible says they do not cry out to me from their hearts, but wail on their beds. They slash themselves, appealing to their gods for grain and new wine, but they turn away from me. Hosea chapter 7 verse 14. The manipulator implies, if you don't meet my emotional needs, I'll get your attention and make you feel guilty by falling apart. Part D. What are the characteristics of spiritually manipulative people? Exit. Bless Jacob. Enter. Beaten to the punch, Esau. He enters his father's presence with food in tow, eager for Isaac to begin eating and expecting the blessing to be bestowed. But Esau's world gets turned upside down with the following question from his father. Who are you? I am your son, he answered, your firstborn Esau. Isaac trembled violently and said, who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it just before you came, and I blessed him. And indeed, he will be blessed. Genesis 27 verses 32 through 33. Esau breaks out with a loud and bitter cry, having no trouble identifying his impersonator and devising a dastardly plan of his own. Every ruse has repercussions, whether the initiator is a relative, friend, or foe. But there are especially serious repercussions when the ruse affects a person's relationship with God. A person with the heart for the Lord may struggle with the temptation to manipulate others. The following list identifies the traits of someone who may have developed such a habit or learned a pattern or learned such a pattern of behavior. Controlling religious family members, manipulative church leaders or members, and equivalents in all religions. Covert occult practitioners and mind-controlling cultists. Part E. What characterizes spiritually manipulative groups? Before Esau turns his attention to the rightly named Jacob, Genesis 27 verse 36, he pleads with Isaac, bless me too, my father. Do you only have one blessing, my father? Bless me too, my father. Then Esau wept aloud in Genesis chapter 27 verses 34 and 38. But Isaac's subsequent words for Esau are pitiful compared to what has been proclaimed for Jacob. Your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck. In Genesis 27 verses 39 through 40, the tragic turn of events leads Esau to look ahead to payback time. The days of mourning for my father are near, then I will kill my brother Jacob. Genesis 27 verse 41. Rebecca becomes aware of the planned revenge and decides to manipulate and deceive her husband once again. She concocts a story about how Jacob needs to be sent away to live with her brother Laban in order to protect him from marrying a Hittite woman because Esau's Hittite wives so grieve her. Genesis 27 verse 46. I'm disgusted with living because of these Hittite women. If Jacob takes a wife from among the women of this land, from Hittite women like these, my life will not be worth living. As the manipulative account concludes, Rebecca never sees her beloved son Jacob again, though the two brothers eventually reconcile. The cost of manipulating people rather than trusting God, and of using deception rather than reason, is high indeed. Why then do certain individuals and groups succumb to manipulation? Spiritually manipulative leaders are genuinely authoritarian, implying that God communicates with his people only through a hierarchy of power and not through intimate personal relationship with each individual. Coercive, using any tactic available to persuade followers to disregard their own logic and do what the leaders demand. Condemning, heaping condemnation on outsiders and anyone who leaves their congregation. Discriminatory, telling members their needs are less important than are the needs of leaders. Image conscious, seeking to present themselves as having perfect, unquestionable righteousness. Intimidating, threatening members routinely with punishment or excommunication in order to gain compliance. Isolating, encouraging members to minimize or discontinue contact with family, friends, or the outside world. Legalistic, expecting members to follow rigid rules and to make extreme sacrifices of money, time, energy for the sake of the organization. Perfectionistic, condemning failure of any type or magnitude and ridiculing members who fail the organization in any area to any degree. Suppressive of criticism, maintaining that those who question anything about the organization are actually challenging God's authority. Terrorizing, blaming the ministry's problems on the sins of the members and threatening God's displeasure and discipline. Unbalanced, flaunting their distinctiveness to validate their claim of having a special relationship with God. Most spiritual leaders who use spiritual manipulation present God as a stern taskmaster, a judgmental judge. These spiritual manipulators have misplaced confidence in themselves that often leads to frustration, failure, and self-condemnation. And their attitude towards others is one of prideful exclusivity, which produces frustration, fear, and resentment in others. The Bible tells us in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 13, such people are false apostles, deceitful workers, masquerading as apostles of Christ. Love turned lethal, the lover boy story. She considers him her lover boy, smooth, sweet, soothing to her heart. At age 17, Anna is in love and ready to marry the man who has made every promise to her, especially to love her for life. One day he exclaims, "Let's go to Greece," wooing her away from her Albanian home and the cultural oppression she feels. She simply cannot resist. The prospect of building a life together in Greece sounds like heaven on earth until it becomes a living hell. Upon their arrival in Greece, the man she loves, the man she trusts, does the unbelievable, the unimaginable, the unthinkable. In exchange for her devotion, he destroys every promise by selling her to a sex trafficker and stealing her passport. What? This is the most horrifying form of manipulation anyone could experience. Anna's hopes are dashed, her body is debased, and her dreams are destroyed. She becomes yet another manipulated victim of the lover boy syndrome sweeping across Europe. Young men fiending to love to lure young women away from the security of family and friends, then callously selling them to depraved sex traffickers. Anna's initiation into her dark new world begins with rape and beatings, Soon she is held hostage in a hotel with 30 other girls from different countries. All are forced to work the streets as prostitutes, and then they experience torture upon torture. Anna is expected to have sexual relations with 50 men a day. A full 24-hour cycle often leaves her body beaten and bloodied. Many times she tries to escape, but is always caught and forced to endure even more torture. For 2 years, Anna is viciously victimized, repeatedly, day after day. Eventually, Anna comes across a computer, and on a social network, she makes a desperate plea to a woman she doesn't even know. This caring woman who lives near the hotel cannot ignore Anna's degrading plight and desperate cry for help. Together, they make arrangements for Anna to slip out of a back window, then flee to the woman's car for a fast getaway. The escape is successful. Ultimately, Anna makes it back to her native Albania, but the nightmare is far from over. Although she had been deceitfully victimized, Anna struggles with overwhelming guilt and shame, resulting in several suicide attempts. Her former prostitution becomes a burden she can share with only one other person, her cousin, who had also been rescued from sex trafficking. Tragically, Anna can't even tell her parents about her horrendous ordeal because within her culture is the disturbing premise: it's always the woman's fault. Women wrongfully bear the shame, even when they have been bitterly abused. Anna also lives with continual fear. If her brother were ever to discover she had been a prostitute, he would probably kill her. Because Anna's cousin had received compassionate help from a Hope for the Heart ministry partner in Albania, Anna calls its live daily talk show to share her story and seek hope and healing. Telling her tragic story is a huge step for Anna because Albanians struggle with another premise deeply embedded within their culture. People don't talk about their problems. Yet Anna's tearful life story broadcast on the radio is so moving that God uses her pain to powerfully impact the lives of others. In fact, immediately after she shares the warning signs of manipulation and the steps of preventing it, how to avoid being a victim of the lover boy syndrome, 2 young women call the ministry for counseling, believing their boyfriends are in the process of trying to sell them. Through this radio ministry, Anna becomes a Christian and now attends an Albanian university to become a teacher. Today, because of past pain, she can help others move out of manipulative relationships and cut the strings of controlling people. And because God rescued Anna in a mighty way, she can personally attest to these powerful words from her own life. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. Psalm 40, verse 2.